Storytime about how I got a facelift when I was 18 to become a famous Instagram model. And I am a famous Instagram model. Can you guess who I am? Disclaimer, this is not my story time. This is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. I grew up in the Kylie Jenner era when she started getting her lips done. Remember that? Kardashians were a Bible to me. I watched Keeping Up with the Kardashians and was totally obsessed with their looks. You see, at the time, I wasn't the prettiest girl. I was really skinny. I had no bum and no boobalas. Once Kylie Jenner started getting her body done, that's when I really started getting FOMO. To be honest, and I know this sounds cliche, but social media made me start hating my face. I would constantly compare myself to Instagram models. That's when I started photoshopping my pictures. It made me feel so much better to post. Then I begged my parents for lip fillers. They finally said yes and I went ahead and got them. For me, the next logical thing was to look like Kylie Jenner. So I decided my parents to let me get surgery. They finally said yes, but trust me, it took a long time to convince them. We went to a plastic surgeon and that's when I decided to get a full facelift. I know it sounds severe, but it was so worth it. But I didn't stop just at my face. I even convinced my parents to get my boobalas and my bum done part. After getting all my plastic surgery at 18, I finally became a famous Instagram model. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. This is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. The healing process, of course, was painful, but it was so worth it to me. Once I saw my body and my face, I felt so much better about myself. But something else was missing. Everyone on Instagram was getting their brows tattooed and lash extensions. I went ahead and got those things done too. And I started paying back my parents for all the surgeries. So this was my basic beauty routine. I would get a mani-pedi every 2 weeks. I would get my hair colored every single month. I was getting lip fillers every 6 months. Facials every 2 weeks. Personal trainer who I exercise with 5 times a week. And I forgot to mention, I had 100,000 followers on Instagram at this point. So I was getting a lot of brand deals aside from the modeling. That's when I started noticing that Kylie Jenner's butt was looking bigger, so I wanted to get mine bigger. I also wanted to get my hips wider like her too. I even started buying all the designer stuff that Kylie was wearing too. Part 3 is that I asked my plastic surgeon to make my butt look bigger like Kylie's. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. By the way, at this point, I'd already had a full facelift and lots of body work done by the time I was 18. My plastic surgeon told me he wouldn't give me another round of butt filler. I was really upset. Then my parents asked me to come over. When I got to their house, they told me the plastic surgeon had called their house and told them that I was looking for more surgery. My parents were beginning to worry, but I assured them that everything was okay. I was not addicted to plastic surgery or anything like that. I just knew how competitive the modeling industry was. Instead, I decided to get filler in my face. I got my nose and my cheeks done. And that's when I started getting hired by more makeup companies. After a year, my Instagram following went from 100,000 to 1 million. I've modeled for over 50 brands and I'm currently planning my own brand. My Instagram followers are constantly accusing me of getting plastic surgery, but I've never admitted to anything. I'll come back to the comments and see if anybody guess who I am. I know people hate Instagram models because they never admit to it, but I will never admit to my plastic surgery. I mean, I'll probably have plastic surgery again. Have you guessed who I am? Storytime about how I found out my husband was receiving naked pictures from a famous influencer. My husband started getting noticed on YouTube a few years ago. Ever since then, he thinks he's a stupid influencer. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. This is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. And let me just say, my husband is so stupid. He is literally like the dumbest person I've ever met. We dated for 2 months before he asked me to marry him. And unfortunately, I said yes. A few months after we got married, his YouTube channel started taking off. And he started acting like he was a stupid celebrity. He hired a publicist. He got himself invited to stupid influencer events. He even tried to get a Hollywood agent. God, he's so stupid. Around this time, he started meeting a lot of influencers, both guys and girls. He was also growing on Instagram. He was always on Instagram. He's so dumb that he wrote all of his passwords in a piece of paper, and it was in my nightstand. So of course, I logged into his Instagram. As soon as I open his DMs, I see naked pictures from a very famous influencer. He was sending her pictures to part 2 as I open his DMs and I see a famous influencer send him naked pictures. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. So I started scrolling through the whole conversation with this famous influencer. She had sent him like 15 or more naked pictures. And like I said in part 2, he was sending her pictures too. But his were the ones that disappear after you open them. So maybe he's not so stupid. I took screenshots and saved them on my phone. Then I scrolled through the rest of his DMs. And holy moly, there were other influencers who were sending him pictures. Not all of them were naked pictures. Mind you, all of these influencers knew he was married. I was extremely furious, but I knew I had to keep my head cool. By the way, have you guessed who he is? So here's what I did. I took a stupid little play button from YouTube, and I threw it in a dumpster. Then I turned on the fireplace and put all of his clothes. And I took his passport and ripped all the pages out. You won't believe what happens next. Part 3 is after I burned all of my YouTuber husband's clothes, I took all the naked pictures that the influencer sent him, and I sent them to her management. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. I wrote to her management and explained what happened. I told them that if they didn't stop working with her, I would send the pictures to TMZ. And just like I expected, within minutes, I got a reply. They begged me to delete the pictures, and they offered me $20,000 to keep my mouth shut. Of course, I said no. And that's when my husband comes home. He sees all of his clothes that I burnt. God, the look on his face was so stupid. I showed him all of my receipts. Then he confessed that he only did the dirty with her once. I literally thought they had just sent pictures to each other. And his phone rings. Guess who it is? It's the damn influencer. She goes off on him and tells him that I'm threatening her career and that how could he be so stupid to not delete the pictures. They haven't spoken since. I still don't know what to do. Did I send the pictures to TMZ? I already filed for divorce too. I want all his money. Storytime about how I escaped my abusive husband. Disclaimer, this is not my storytime. It was sent to me on Instagram. My soon-to-be ex-husband is the most toxic person I've ever met in my entire life. We've been married for almost 3 years. We got married after 4 months of being boyfriend and girlfriend. And to be honest, no, we really didn't know each other. At the beginning, he was totally kind, generous, and really, really fun. We were always going to parties and we had so many friends. Here's where things started getting scary. He never posted me on his Instagram. In fact, he rarely ever posted on his Instagram at all. I'm very active on social media. I'm constantly posting pictures of us together. The fact that he never posted me on his social media made me think that maybe he was trying to look for other girls. But then I found out the truth. One day I get a DM from this girl, and she told me how my boyfriend had abused her in the past. She even had to get a restraining order. She basically told me she wanted to warn me about him. I didn't respond to her message because I wanted to ask him first. I showed him the messages later on that day, and he went nuts. He punched the wall, and he slapped me straight across the face. Part 2 is up. He slapped me straight across the face, and I fell to the ground. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. When he saw what he'd done, he started apologizing right away. Then he said that the girl who contacted me on Instagram to warn me about him was just his stalker, and that he had broken up with this girl, but she couldn't get over him. At the time, we weren't living together, so I went back to my mom's place. I didn't speak to him for a few days. Then he started coming over to my mom's house every single day with flowers, apologizing and begging me back. Unfortunately, I decided to forgive him. 2 weeks later, he asked me to marry him, and I said yes. I posted a picture of my engagement ring on Instagram, and that's when I got another message from another girl. She told me that my boyfriend was abusive and that she also had to get a restraining order. I didn't know who to believe. I went to my mother-in-law's house and I asked her what had happened. And she basically told me that he has issues with his temper. I asked her if what the girl said was true, and she said it wasn't her business to say. A few weeks later, we got married, and that's when the real torture started. He became super controlling and mean. And when I wouldn't do something he wanted, would lock me in my room for hours. My husband would lock me in the bedroom for hours. Then it got worse. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. It got to the point that whenever he would get mad, he would either push me, shake me, or slap me. This went on for a year, but I always hoped that he would just change. After 2 years, I decided to get in contact with the women who said they got restraining orders against my husband. Met up with both of them at a cafe to lie to my husband and say that I was going to be late at work. They brought all their receipts. They had pictures and text messages, emails, and police reports. Couldn't believe it. I mean, I could, but at the same time I couldn't, you know? If I had just paid attention to these girls before we got married, none of this would have happened. But these girls knew exactly what I was going through. So we hatched a plan of how I would escape my abusive husband. At this point, he controlled everything, my cell phone and my bank account. By the way, I hadn't told my mom anything at this point. When I asked her for money and I told her why, she was shocked. The plan would be that I was going to escape at night. I waited for Friday because I knew he'd go out with his friends to drink. I called an Uber, but a few minutes later, my husband shows up at our door. Part 4 is up. The night I was planning to escape my abusive husband, I called an Uber to the house, but my husband showed up 2 minutes later. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. As soon as he walks in through the door, he was totally drunk. That's when he told me that he was hungry. I pretended that everything was normal and that I didn't have an Uber coming to save me. I went to the kitchen, I made him a sandwich as quickly as I could. I came back out, took one bite, and started falling asleep. Thank God. I hid in my backpack behind a curtain, slowly grabbed the backpack and my shoes, and that's when my cell phone notified me that the Uber was there. I was terrorized at this point because I was hoping the noise from the cell phone didn't wake him up. I turned around, but he was totally passed out. I ran barefoot to the Uber, got in, and told him to drive away. Went straight to a friend's house and turned off my phone. Next day, I went straight to a lawyer to file for divorce. I had text messages and pictures. I also went to the police and they said that I can't file a restraining order yet. My husband, of course, is already looking for me. He went to my mom's house, but she didn't let him in. But here's the problem. I already miss him. He sent me an email apologizing, swearing that it won't happen again. My gut's telling me not to go back. What do you guys think? Story time about how I came out as gay to my husband. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. I'm 27 years old, and when I was in high school, I knew that I like girls. In fact, I pretty much only dated girls throughout all of my high school. I did also date guys. My parents were totally accepting of this, by the way. Growing up, I always knew that I wanted to marry a man so that I could have kids. When I got into college, I started dating this girl. Her and I dated for a couple of weeks, and she introduced me to my now husband. So he and I started hooking up behind her back, and she eventually found out, and she broke up with me. Fast forward a few years later, and we're married. But here's the problem. I found myself only being attracted to women, and I was definitely not attracted to my husband. Obviously, this became a huge problem in the relationship. So guess what my husband did? He hired an escort to come spend some time with us, if you know what I mean. This was great, but I basically only wanted to be with the escort, not my husband. A few weeks later, the escort and I actually started dating. It's so bad, I know. My husband had no idea. And this escort actually asked me to be her girlfriend. Part 2 is up. So the escort and I started dating behind my husband's back. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. Like, her and I were in a full-blown relationship. Mind you, I'm a woman. Mind you, my husband doesn't know that I like women only. This went on for a few months. I was living a total lie. My husband would go to work. Since I worked from home, I would go to my escort girlfriend's apartment and spend the day with her. I even took a toothbrush and some clothes. One day, my girlfriend and I decided to go watch a movie. We're standing in line to buy popcorn, and of course, we're kissing and holding hands. This is when one of my husband's employees comes up to me, taps my shoulder, and says hi. But she acted like she didn't see anything. Like she was just coming up to me and saying hi. I could tell that something was off. I mean, she saw me kissing this girl. That's when the guilt started getting to me. could no longer lie to my husband. I knew I had to come out to him. That same night, I talked to my husband. I confessed everything and told him that I really liked women only. That's when he tells me that he knew about the relationship this whole time. That he knew I only liked women. Part 3 is up. My husband tells me that he knew I was having an affair this whole time. That he also knew that I only liked women. Claiming this is not my story time, it was sent to me on Instagram. And that's when my husband tells me that it's okay. Because he can deal with me having this affair. Because he didn't want anyone to know that he was married to someone that liked women. He told me he'd rather stay married, have kids with me, and basically live a lie. I also forgot to mention my husband's a really wealthy guy. He offered me a lot of money to stay with him and have kids. Last week, I got a letter from his lawyer. It was a contract basically saying that if I stay with him and have his kids, he'll pay me a very large amount of money. But here's the thing. I've fallen in love with my escort girlfriend. She thinks I'm going to divorce my husband to be with her. But my husband thinks that I'm going to sign this contract and have his kids. Even my mother-in-law is getting involved. She's begging me to sign the contract and have the kids. Never thought I'd have to choose between love and money. A few days ago, my escort girlfriend actually asked me to move in with her. I told my husband, he said no. What should I do?
Tender touch, drum glove, staying up, just talk to you. You stayed in touch, 2 continents, through all odds. Seems every night, yeah, all the time I'm calling out to you. Seems every time I take a drink, I'm reaching out.
Okay, so story time about how my best friend ruined my birthday. So a little background information. I was 11, about to turn 12, and I was in 6th grade. By the way, I thought this was the funniest thing. The person who sent this story time in, she was like, oh, like, please change the names because the girl in this story time actually watches your videos. Okay, sis, like, anyways. So I had this one friend and we are going to call her Amber. Amber and I had a very off and on friendship because let me tell you about Amber. Amber was the girl who thought that she was very, very popular. Now, I mean, she kind of was, but only because she had manipulated everybody into liking her. And she pretty much had everybody wrapped around her little slimy fingers. Well, also, her father owned a construction company where we lived, so she was very, very wealthy. Like, this is the type of girl who could buy her way out of any problem and buy all of her friends. But she was also the girl that you wanted at your birthday party, because since her family was very wealthy and she didn't have any siblings, so she was an only child, if she came to your birthday party, you knew that you were getting some extravagant, expensive shit. Well, there was this one boy that I really, really, really liked and still do to this day. He was the same age and he was in the same grade as Amber and I, and we are going to call him Colin. Well, no one knew that I liked Colin except for Amber, which, to be honest, I really don't even know why I told her, because I should have known that it was going to backfire in my face. Anyways, so Colin and I's family were very, very religious. Like, I mean extremely religious. So even though we liked each other, we could not date. But then again, it sounds reasonable. Like, we were in 6th grade. Nobody should have been dating anybody in 6th grade. It's just not right. Well, in addition to that, our parents were also super strict. Probably because they were religious, to be honest, if that makes any sense. All right, so let's fast forward to my sophomore year. So surprisingly, Amber and I were actually doing pretty good, considering, like I said before, her and I were off and on literally 24/7. Like, literally, her and I being friends was just never a good thing, and I wish I would have saw it before, but I guess I was blind to red flags, even though she literally put me through 4 years of humiliation. But let's not get into that. Anyways, at the time I was 15, about to turn 16, and I was throwing a birthday party, like most would do. And of course I decided to invite her because at the time she was my best friend. Well, since our friendship had been going so well, I didn't think that anything bad would come of this. Well, the one day when we were in school, she asked me who all was going to be at the party. And as I was listing off names, I tried to nonchalantly mention that Colin was gonna be there. And right after I said that, she had this very evil look in her eye. Yeah, just super evil. Anyways, after that I really just should have disinvited her from the party, but I was blind to red flags. That's what I'm getting from this right now. I was blind. Well, in an instant, her mood went back to normal and she was like, OMG, I'm so happy for you. Like, this is gonna be so amazing. Hopefully now you and Colin will have a chance to get together. She was like, I know that you've liked him for a super long time. So now I'm just like, oh, you know, like things are gonna go good. You know, she doesn't care as much as I thought she would. You know, she's happy for me. Who's gonna tell her? Who is going to tell her? Anyways, yeah, she just kept going on about how she was so happy for me and everything. Well, later that night, she had texted me and asked me what I wanted for my birthday. And I knew exactly what I wanted. I told her about this necklace that I had been looking at for a while and how I was super excited for it because it had a C on it for Colin. Well, after I told her, I instantly regretted it because somehow I should have listened to my gut that she was going to screw me over and somehow make me look like an asshole at my own party. Anyways, so when I told her about it, she acted all excited and she was like, oh, that's so exciting. Like, are you gonna give it to him at your party? Like, she was just asking a lot of very unnecessary questions. And I know you guys are thinking, well, she's your best friend, duh, she's gonna ask questions. No. Like, she was asking some real weird shit. Like, oh, are you sure you really like him and you don't like this person? Or, yeah, just stuff like that, just being an ass pretty much. Well, I told her that I was probably gonna give it to him a few days later because I wanted it to be more intimate. And she was like, oh, that's weird. Like, what do you guys plan on doing after? Acting like I was a hoe. Sis, you really got the wrong one. Anyway, so a week later, my party rolls around. Well, Amber just was not having it. So at 3 a.m., she decides that we should all open presents. Even though I was just gonna open them the next day because it was too late, we were all tired, and I was enjoying cuddling with my man on the couch. By the way, this was like a sleepover birthday party, and yes, my parents let him spend the night even though they were super strict. Don't ask me because I don't even know. So I'm pretending to sleep right next to Colin and she's screaming for me to open my gifts, like about to wake my parents up. And then she comes over and shakes the living shit out of me and says, you have to come open your presents right now. So I get up and she runs to the kitchen and grabs her gifts and shoves it in my face, telling me to open hers first. So at this point I'm thinking like she didn't get the necklace because, like I had said before, I wanted to show it to him a few days later because I wanted it to be more intimate and just him and I. So I wasn't really thinking anything of it. Well, when I'm about to open her gift, she pulls out her phone and starts recording. And as soon as I saw the corner of the box, I knew exactly what it was. Does anybody want to guess what she did? I'll give you a second. When I opened the box, instead of the necklace having a letter C on it, she got me one with a J on it. And I know all of you are probably like, oh, well, you know, she probably did it on accident, blah, blah, blah. No. No, she didn't. She did not. She really did not. The J was actually the letter of Colin's best friend's name, James. So of course I got pissed off and I told her that wasn't the one that I wanted. I wanted the one with the C on it. Well, Miss Girl decides that she's gonna get very, very defensive. And she goes, you told me that you like James and not Colin. Like, what are you talking about? I literally asked you 5 times if you were sure you wanted a J on it and not a C. Colin was standing over in the corner just giving me a dirty ass look. So then I tried explaining to him that she had been lying the whole time, and he just stayed quiet and handed me his gift. He got me the gift that I wanted without even knowing the slightest bit of what I wanted. I didn't tell him about a necklace. I didn't tell him where the necklace was from. or anything. He got me the necklace with the C on it. Well, since Amber saw me enjoying my gift a little too much, she ripped the necklace out of my hand and smashed it. Like literally threw it on the ground and then stomped on it. But she did it so nonchalant. She grabbed it and she was like, oh, like this is the one that you wanted. It's so cute. Just a whole bunch of bull caca. So at this point, I'm very pissed off and I start screaming at her and she's like, OMG, like it was an accident. I'm so sorry. No, you're not, sis. No, you were not. So after that, we all just went to sleep because we were too tired to talk about it then. And the next day, she came and tried to talk to me in school, but I really just cut her off at that point. I did not want to deal with her bullshit anymore. So fast forward, my birthday was ruined. I still hate her, but Colin and I are currently dating and our relationship is amazing. And he got me another necklace and 2 promise rings.
Most beautiful diamond. You've got the most beautiful diamond eyes I've ever seen in my whole life. The skyline is jealous. I'm looking at you, how you shine.
I, female 34, lost my husband 8 weeks ago. I'm trying to stay collected and welcoming to all the supportive family members who come to offer help. My sister is the most supportive one, although her husband sometimes acts inappropriately, especially after he told me that now I'm burden-free and can live my life, given I was my husband's sole carer. I tried to let go of those comments, thinking he didn't know better. He, my sister, and my family came to visit last week. They cooked dinner for me and kept me company for a bit. After dinner, my brother-in-law asked for a minute with me inside the kitchen. He started telling about a co-worker of his who is single, then listed everything good about him. I was confused as to why he was telling me all that. He then reached out for his pant pocket and pulled a piece of paper with his co-worker's phone number on it, telling me to give him a call sometime. I was floored. I couldn't really tell if he was joking or what, but he looked serious and kept insisting I take the number. I lost it. I just started yelling at him that my husband had just died and he was out of his mind to try to hook me up with a co-worker of his. He tried to explain that it wasn't like that and offered me something helpful, but I didn't know what he meant. I called him disrespectful, then yelled at him to get out of my house. My sister and the others ran into the kitchen, not knowing what was going on. I told them, then pressured him to leave my house, but my sister asked that I calm down, but I couldn't. He left, then my sister left quietly. After I calmed down, I sat with my family, and they said I was in the right, in that what he did was not okay. Still, I needed to keep in mind that he and my sister helped so much by cooking for me, comforting me, and doing so much for me in these difficult times, so I shouldn't have reacted like that, and could have been a little more considerate and graceful. They said kicking him out was too much, and I should call him later and talk things out so I won't ruin my relationship with him and possibly my sister. It's been days and I haven't called and my sister hasn't visited or called, which means she's upset with me, and now I'm beginning to think they're most likely hurt because I acted ungrateful after everything they've done for me. Not the idiot. I can't tell if your brother-in-law is an actual jerk or just astoundingly lacking in empathy and social judgment. Still, either way, his actions were wildly insensitive and inappropriate, and your actions were completely understandable. You don't owe anyone an apology. What he did was outright callous. You can call your sister and say that you appreciate everything they've done to support you since your husband's death, but that your brother-in-law's offer was too soon and misguided, and that in your grief your reaction was amplified. If he's willing to apologize for his lack of tact, you can apologize for the force of your reaction. You did not overreact. I think he should be the one to make the first gesture towards reconciliation, but he's proven he lacks completely in compassion and sense. So if you feel like it, this could be a way to move past this. Not the idiot. I'm autistic and know this is a bad idea. I usually have a hard time understanding facial expressions and body language, but grief is a pretty obvious expression and I usually don't miss it. This guy was playing a game called I'm Only Trying to Help, where he offered an unhelpful or offensive solution to a problem. However, you didn't ask for help. When the help is offensive and rejected, the payoff is confusion and attention for the guy and anger for you. The easy solution is not to play and not give the sister's husband the attention and confusing rejection he wants. The fact that he pulled you into another room to do this as if he alone understood you at that moment and wanted to be privately acknowledged for doing a good thing is a huge indicator that he's being selfish and wanting praise for the gesture. The burden comment is a huge red flag. He sees the caretaking of a loved one as an interruption of his life, which should be concerning for your sister. When my children went to college, I put aside money to buy them their first house. This money was from an inheritance I'd received. The only caveat was that I had to wait a few years between taking the money out, so only one house could be bought at a time. My youngest was expecting a child with his wife, so I first bought his house in 2018. My oldest wasn't happy with this, but I convinced him it was the better decision. I can now take out the remaining money to give to my oldest. Well, he's now asking me to buy a house for him in the same area as his brother. But since 2018, house prices have quite literally doubled. So the money I put aside can in no way pay for that. And this has created a huge conflict in my family, with my oldest being extremely angry at me. I've apologized, but I didn't think the market would be so unaffordable. I offered to give him the entire amount to do as he wished, and the cash gift amount from my estate in my will. My oldest took the money, bought a house in a different state, and we now have a very tense relationship. I'm incredibly sad that what I thought would be a lovely gift has broken up the family. I feel even worse because this has messed up the relationship between my two sons. Am I the idiot? Not the idiot. You couldn't control the housing market. You did your best to give him an equal share and even compensate for a situational discrepancy that was outside your control. He took the money and is still being crappy to you. I'm sorry, OP. You are the idiot. I don't understand why you wouldn't split the amount you could take out between them so they could both afford a down payment on a home and then split the remainder when you could help them pay off the mortgage. Frankly, if you help with the down payment, I don't see why you'd even need to pay off the house. Why does one kid need an entire house free and clear while the other kid has to rent for 2 more years? People with children can still pay a mortgage. I'm hesitant to call you an idiot for an incredibly generous gift, but I'm going to say you are the idiot. You could have split the money up fairly, but instead, you made yourself the judge over their life choices and arbitrarily decided against your older son. This isn't really about the money. It's about the way you decided who deserved what, when. If you want to fix this, I think a genuine apology and admitting that you made a mistake might go a lot further than a cash gift in your will. I think I would say everyone's the idiot here, though. The oldest sucks for feeling entitled to OP's money. Oldest got $200,000 free and clear for just being born to the right parent. That being said, I see why the oldest would feel resentful. They probably feel like they were punished and devalued for not starting a family early and having OP's grandchild. I feel like we see this a lot. For example, treating adult children who provide grandchildren as if they deserve more than their childless siblings. I'm sure most parents don't intend it to come across like that, but that's how it can feel. I agree with people saying OP should have just given them half of each withdrawal instead of deciding that the youngest deserves it more because they decided to start a family first. I, female 30, live with my husband 35 and 3 children. I work as a freelance artist from home and my husband works long hours driving. As a result, I do most housework and look after our 3 children. When he's off of work and home, he takes on his fair share. Our lives mean that we don't have much free time. I enjoy cooking, and as a mum, I make sure to give my children a wide variety of foods to eat. I want them to appreciate different cultures, flavors, and different types of cuisine from all around the world, and grow up kind and respectful of others. So, a few days a week, 3 out of 7, my children and I cook together and make a recipe from another country. We all enjoy this, and it gives a perfect segue into learning about a foreign country. On the other hand, my husband has a more plain palate and prefers simpler English dishes that he grew up with, such as pies, fish and chips, roast dinners, etc. We eat plenty of meals like this too. A week ago, we hired a babysitter and went to a friend's house for dinner. They cooked a beautiful vegetarian pie with mashed potatoes and vegetables. My husband turned to them and said, "Oh God, finally, a decent meal for once. Opie's always cooking these awful smelly dishes." Hurt, I looked at my husband and asked him what he meant, and he said that he only puts up with it because he doesn't have time to cook something decent for himself. The meal was a little awkward after that, but neither of us brought it up again while there until we came home. I told him that I wouldn't stop cooking foreign food with the kids, and if he didn't like it, he would have to cook something for himself. He once again said that he didn't have time for that, and I should just cook him something he likes at the same time, which I refused to do, mainly because when he comes home after work, he spends all his time up until bedtime gaming. This is around 4 hours of time after he comes in, so he has plenty of time to cook a quick but decent meal for himself and enjoy his hobby. Once again this week I cooked with my kids, and like I told my husband, I didn't leave him any. He was angry but ordered takeout. He went around to his parents' house the second time and his mum cooked for him. The next day, I got a phone call from my mother-in-law saying I was an idiot for not cooking for my husband and that I spent all day doing my hobby, my actual job, and why shouldn't he enjoy his hobby? Which again, he still can and does do. I also still cook for him when I'm not cooking anything foreign. Am I the idiot for refusing to cook for him on these days? Edit. Bills are split 50-50, as yes, as an artist, I do make enough to support my family. My husband isn't the sole breadwinner. Not the idiot. He was an absolute idiot for making that comment in front of company and for his wording. He didn't want smelly food. Well, you did as he asked and didn't leave him a share so he wouldn't be forced to eat it. No matter how little time one has, everyone has 5 minutes to do an omelette. Cut some mozzarella and some tomatoes on the side, sprinkle salt, basil and oil, and boom! Food. If he doesn't want to do that and has to run to mommy to feed him, there are way larger issues than his childish palate. Maybe mozzarella and basil are too exotic for his fragile palate. Your husband is an adult and more than capable of cooking for himself. If he has time for gaming, then he can find time to cook himself a decent meal. Also, I'm so fed up with adult men running to their moms when they have any problem with their spouses. Why do they even marry? They should stay with their mothers forever and be their mama's boy. Also, if he's gaming 4 hours a night, then how is he doing his fair share of parenting when he's home? He sounds selfish, rude, and entitled. Let's just say it. Most women are conditioned to think a man doing anything except moving and pumping gas is extra. She's married to someone who didn't hesitate to ask her to cook 2 dinners, so there's no doubt in my mind that they have such a dynamic. Those special meals with her kids are her way of making sure that the kids don't end up like husband. Instead, they'll grow up to be much more adventurous and respectful. OP, your husband and your mother-in-law are horrible people. Sorry that you have to put up with their bratty selves. Me, 28 female, and my husband, 29, have been married for 5 years. My husband was a nurse until he told me he wanted to become a doctor. I was fully supportive, and he's now in his first year of medical school. I've supported both of us as he can't work while in school, but I recently found out that our rent was being raised by $500 at the end of our contract, April. This was honestly the last straw as it pushed us past where we were financially comfortable, so I raised the idea of buying a home. This had been a conversation for years, but my husband had always said we could after he had paid off his school debt from nursing, paid off early 2020. I asked my mother, real estate agent, who told me that it would be better for that money to go towards mortgage repayments and not rent with what we've been paying. I brought this all up to my husband, who shut it down almost immediately. He told me we agreed to wait until he paid off all his debt. I told him that was for nursing and that he was in school for 6 years, which was hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of debt, and some doctors don't pay off their debt for 20 plus years. I told him I'd been supportive of this career change and by financially supporting the household, but that it was the best financial decision for us and would relieve the financial burden on me. I brought up the saving we had for our deposit and how we could afford something small and modest within our budget, but he told me it was in our interest to use that money to pay off his loans. I asked him if he realized the financial burden this would put on me, but he said it was temporary and eventually he'd make more than me, so it would be even. And I'd agreed to this. My mother called and asked if we were going to look into buying a house, but I told her we weren't and we'd be looking for somewhere cheaper to rent instead. However, she insisted we at least consider it because it made the most financial sense and asked if it was because we didn't have a down deposit. I told her that we would probably use that to pay off my husband's debt, and he didn't want more debt until he was debt-free from student loans. Days later, my mother and father came for lunch and told us they had news. They offered to gift us the down deposit of a home. I was over the moon and shocked by the offer. Once they left, my husband exploded on me, claiming I emasculated him and made him look bad in front of my parents. I told him I never asked for this, but we should take it as it was a privilege most people don't get and would relieve so much financial burden on me. He refused to talk to me or my parents until we apologized for shaming, emasculating him, but I refused to. I apologized but told him I wouldn't make my parents as they'd done nothing wrong. Am I the idiot? Not the idiot. Your husband is straight up ridiculous. Is he otherwise a good partner? Is he thoughtful? Is he kind? Does he respect you in every other area of your life besides this one? And I mean everywhere. Because if he isn't, I would even wonder if it's worth being married to someone acting like this. The kind of emasculation he's describing doesn't actually exist. It's a byproduct of toxic masculinity, and it's just nonsense. 100% agree. His wife is supporting him through costly and lengthy training to realize his dream. It's funny how that does not emasculate him, but he is emasculated by the generosity that would ensure she isn't massively struggling and has some stability. OP, do not use your savings to pay off his debt. You could end up with absolutely nothing. If this indicates his attitude generally, then leave now. Take your half of the savings and buy a place with your parents' help. Not the idiot, just something to consider, but if you help pay off his student loans and financially support him for the next 10 years, say, then he divorces you, you are left with nothing, and him a debt-free life earning a doctor's salary. So sorry, OP, but you're simply this guy's starter wife and he knows it. That's why he's so worried about going in on the house and carrying his own debt load past med school. I think you're going to get burned here. Since last year, I, 30 male, and my fiancée, 32 female, have been searching for a new apartment. My fiancée wants to be closer to her family and hates the commute from the apartment. Another issue is no animals are allowed. My brother, 34, passed away in November 2021, and we adopted his dog, Doug. Doug is a 4-year-old husky mix and a very well-behaved dog. My brother and I were very close, and I promised to care for Doug if anything ever happened. My fiancée found an apartment close to her family and was close to our jobs. The rent was a little cheaper and had more room. The issue I have with it is that only animals under £40 are welcome. Doug is heavier than £40 and I'm not looking to rehome him. My fiancée scheduled a tour of the apartment and had her parents meet us there. When the tour was finished, my fiancée and her parents talked about the apartment and when we planned to move in. I told them that I wanted to keep looking and find a place that does not restrict animals. I added in that rehoming Doug was not an option. My fiancée didn't take my response well and got angry that I would give up a nice apartment for an animal. Her parents think I'm being unreasonable and should look at rehoming options. Am I the idiot for choosing my dog over an apartment? Not the idiot. If someone suggested I rehome any of my cats, I would suggest they rehome themselves. Your fiancé's behavior means she doesn't care about your wishes, like keeping your damn dog, and she is trying to turn it around, making you look like the selfish one. Are you sure she isn't using this apartment issue to get you to abandon your dog? Also, if you're engaged, it should be our dog. There are other apartments out there, but only one Doug. Not the idiot. Most animal lovers would give up more than an apartment for their beloved pet. Doug is part of the family, and a home that doesn't welcome him is not a home for your family. I think your fiancée is being manipulative by bringing her parents to view an apartment that she knows you won't take. She knew right off the restrictions and brought them along, knowing you wouldn't be okay with it, to try to manipulate you. It sounds like a great way to start a marriage.